What's the scariest moment you've lived through in a place everyone considers safe? Story 1 was taking my kids for a walk in the park near our apartment. Once when a guy and a woman came out of the tree line suddenly, and the guy said to give him my wallet and anything else in my pockets. He had some weird screwdriver and knife thing, and I pushed my daughter, my eldest child, behind me. I was going to do the same for my son, but the woman grabbed his other arm for some reason, and my heart felt like it was going to explode for some reason. I suddenly forgot about self-preservation and jumped forwards and broke the woman's nose. I felt a sharp pain under my ribs and looked to see that the man had just stabbed me, but at this point 2 other guys who had been jogging were running up and shouting. The police that patrolled the park showed up not long after that. I was sitting and trying not to bleed to death. The man had run off and his screwdriver was still in me. The woman was on the ground crying and shouting because I had also knocked the top front of her teeth loose and out. The 2 joggers were originally asking the woman if I was the assaulter, but the situation cleared up soon. I got taken to the hospital and questioned about the incident. There was a while when it looked like I was going to be charged with battery for the woman, since it turns out she actually had a decently well-off family, was just dealing with addiction. They tried to sue me, but it was thrown out and she was sentenced for attempted kidnapping. I had a tube in my chest for 2 weeks after my surgery to remove the blade, but it all cleared up after that. Just glad my kids are safe. Story 2. It was well lit and populated as it was my workplace. I was a pour in a foundry at the time. Due to a mistake in the metal, it had to be put back into the furnace instead of being poured. A job that is done by using a crane to take the ladle, a big bucket full of molten metal, back to the furnace. The ladle is then manually rolled over and the metal poured back into the furnace. I was the lucky guy to roll it in. And whilst rolling it, the crane driver made a mistake and moved the ladle out of position. This resulted in a wave of molten metal at around degrees Celsius, approximately degrees Fahrenheit, flying toward me like water off a spoon in the sink. Due to the light coming from the molten metal, I could not gauge the depth of the wave at the time, but looked down to see nothing but orange light surrounding me from the waist up. This lasted a moment at most. But in that moment, every possible injury that could come from that crossed my mind. No injury came of that. Like a spoon in the sink, the wave was very thin and my gear was good enough. But I was genuinely terrified then. Edit. There are a few people having difficulty picturing this. The wave of metal that hit me was splashed back off the top rim of the furnace. I was on a stand. About half of my body was above the rim of the furnace. When rolling the metal in, it comes out of the top of the bucket, and the crane operator managed to clip the furnace ventilation. This turned the ladle and caused it to go everywhere. What hit me was more like a sheet of metal that happened to be molten. Seeing it hit me, I was unable to tell how deep the actual wave was. So from my perspective, I had a sheet of molten metal around my waist that was unknown depth and incredibly hot. As I was the one turning the ladle in, I flicked down the lock on the turning wheel and quickly turned to jump down from the stand. This all happened very quickly. There was a distinct line and some metal splash on the front of my jacket where the wave had come into contact with me. Once I determined I was okay, I put the gear back on and finished the rollover. Story 3, I was or maybe years old. My mom took me to the mall so she could go to the Target store. There was a baseball card and comic book store right next to the Target. And while she shopped, I got to go look at the collectibles. While I was looking at the cards in the case, a guy came in. He looked around for a minute, then approached me and asked if I liked baseball cards. I said that I did, and he said he had a Babe Ruth card in his van and asked if I would like to see it. We were right at the counter, and the clerk was right there, but I got a really creepy vibe from this guy. I said no and left the store to go back to Target and find my mom. I looked behind me as I walked into Target, and sure enough, he was following me. I was starting to get a little scared, so I turned into the women's underwear aisle, thinking he would not follow me. He kept after me until I finally found my mom. I never told her about it because I did not want to scare her. At the time, I thought maybe he wanted to steal my dollar, but now I am pretty sure he wanted more than Dollar Story 4. I go grocery shopping at the same store at the same time, maybe twice a week. There works a grocery bagger, and once before he waited by my car to help me put groceries in my trunk. It threw me off and made me uncomfortable. I get anxiety in social situations, but I figured he was just being polite and doing his job. I'm a really shy person, and my instinct is to be polite no matter how uncomfortable I am. Plus, and I do not mean this in a rude way, from our first encounter, I get the sense that he is not all there in the head. So yesterday, I went straight from the store to my car, opened the trunk, and promptly started putting groceries in. Out of nowhere, this guy appears and we engage in polite small talk. He asks how I am doing, and I reply, but make the mistake of asking how he is. There he goes off on a rant of how this whole year has been awful, how he has disturbing thoughts about harming this dog. Not sure if it was his dog or another. He lost me in the rant. And also how watching people being executed by hanging is entertaining. He is getting pretty passionate in this rant, and it escalates to how it is, in his view, hypocritical how the justice system treats people who commit violent crimes and how it is allowed for Americans to do so in other countries when fighting a war. Story 5. It wasn't me, but when I was still a college student, I witnessed firsthand the bystander effect. A friend and I had just written our wave boards like nerds from the engineering dorm down into the public square. Red Square at the University of Washington. We rode down nonstop from McCarty Hall and were sitting on the library steps watching the sunset. Across the way near the smokestacks, we saw a couple yelling at one another really exaggeratedly. The guy then grabbed the girl and started hauling her about. We were amused as we thought they were just play fighting. There was a large group of students sitting right next to them watching and doing nothing either. Nothing seemed wrong until he threw her to the ground and started dragging her towards the stairwell leading to the parking garage. During this time, a group of 5 girls left the garage and walked past. The girls, still being forcibly dragged, pleaded to them, "Please help me." And we could hear her clearly from across the square. The girls looked and did nothing and kept walking. Nobody on the stairs moved either. They just watched. My friend and I got up and started walking quickly towards them, but they disappeared into the stairwell before we got halfway across. Then we intercepted the girls who had passed them. "Did you see that?" They were asking amongst themselves, worriedly. I glared at them for not stopping. I sent my friend into Odegar Library to have the help desk call the campus police. While he did that, I went into the stairwell and headed down the steps, all the while hearing the girls screaming while the guy kept hitting her and shouting at her. I got to the bottom platform, passing 2 people on their way up. One was joking about how it looked like the guy was going to kill his girlfriend. They were amused and unconcerned and ignored me. The bottom platform has double swinging doors that lead to a smaller room with an elevator and then more doors leading directly into the garage. The guy and girl were in this room, and I was in the stairwell just outside. I waited there for campus police while the guy kept yelling and the girl kept crying. After about seconds, he hit her again, and I hefted my waveboard, kicked the door open, and shouted rather lamely, "Stop it or I'll hit you." The girl took this opportunity to break free and run up the stairs. The guy, taller and more muscular than me, looked surprised as well, but didn't move. He saw my club-like board and gave up immediately. He tried to explain that his girlfriend was threatening to have him deported. He was in the United States, illegally passed his visa or something, and she was trying to blackmail him or something of the sort. I held him there for a few minutes, waiting for campus police, but they still didn't show up. I finally told him to get on the elevator and to stay away from the girl, and that I'd beat him up if I saw him doing that again. He scrammed, went outside, and saw my friend waiting. He said the front desk at the library wasn't willing to call the campus police. And when he finally relented and called, they said they would send a unit out. We waited about an hour, and nobody showed up. Story 6. On the 3rd of this month, in a very well-lit hospital room, my hospitalist came to my bedside after 9 days in the hospital to tell me a blood smear and flow cytometry pointed to me having a T-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that I needed a bone marrow biopsy to confirm. The oncologist came to visit my room to tell me my spleen was also enlarged. And in her best opinion, I had likely a stage 4. If the bone marrow came back as she thought it would, T-cell lymphoma, that I would start chemotherapy the day after the results came back. That it would be 2 rounds of that therapy, and if I did not respond, they would get ready for a bone marrow transplant. Asked me if I had siblings. She said the type she thinks I have is very aggressive, as it did not show in my lymph nodes, but was already showing symptoms in my spleen and liver. Apparently, this is very bad. I have 3 children, and I love them dearly and could not stop thinking of them. It puts so many things into perspective for me. I cried. My family cried. I became extremely negative. The day of the oncologist came into my room. They had some bone marrow results. It all came out quickly. She was now saying the cells looked to be reactive to an atypical infection, and the pathologist saw no clonal cells. She said there was still a polymerase chain reaction pending that would rule out up to % that I was safe, but sent me home. I am now waiting for my appointment Tuesday for the all clear. I am very, very fatigued. I contracted Clostridium difficile while due to heavy antibiotic use. I am very, very, very tired. My anxiety is through the roof every second. I cannot stop researching cancer. I'm scared to live. I'm just so scared. Story 7. As a young teenager in the early S, I went to a slightly low-rent amusement park on a school trip. They had some rides, nothing like the huge ones at premium parks, but there was a reasonable-looking roller coaster with a full loop and a corkscrew-style part. I am sure there is a bunch of terminology I do not know about rides, so do not mind me. My group of friends all decided to give a try. I had never been on one, so while I was a bit scared, it looked pretty cool, so why not? Our group all got on at the same time, talking and teasing each other in the way excited kids do. The cars start moving backwards up a slope. Once it gets to near the top, the cars would release and go down the track. We are still moving up the slope, and I look across at my friend, and his restraint is down. Mine is not. Oh no. I panic naturally. We must be over feet up on a degree slope. There is nothing I could do to get off, and it cannot be too long until the cars would drop. I grab my restraint and pull it down across my chest. I think it locks into place, but now the cars drop. I cannot do anything except hold on. The speed pins me into my seat, and while I do not think I would come out in the corkscrew part, here comes the loop. As I pass the top of the loop, I feel the cars slow just a little. My knuckles must have been transparent. They were gripping the edge of my seat so hard in a vain attempt to hold my upside-down self in the seat. We exit the loop and go up another slope to then reverse the track direction. As it slows, I can just about prise my hands from the seat to check my restraint, and it felt secure. Naturally, I did not quite trust it, and I gripped my seat all the way back through the course. Story 8. I accompanied my dad to the hospital while he was undergoing a routine procedure. They put him under for an hour to do a laryngoscopy. I kicked back in the cheery, well-lit lobby with my tablet, playing a game. I was engrossed in the game, but about minutes later, I realized the place had gone eerily silent. I looked up and there were no nurses or staff anywhere. I was the only person in what had been a room with a half dozen people going back and forth. Looking around, I suddenly noticed a red light flashing over one of the doors. My heart dropped down my chest. My hands went icy and numb. I started counting the doors. The red light was flashing over my dad's door. I walked slowly down the hallway, trying not to make a sound. I did not want to disturb anyone. I did not want to miss any sounds. I did not want to know what was happening in the room I was walking toward. I felt like a scared 7-year-old. A nurse came out, and he grabbed me on the shoulder. "Hey," he said casually, "we are working with your dad right now, but I need to have you wait in the lobby right now, okay?" "Okay, what is going on?" My voice was small and timid and high, and I hated hearing it, hated feeling helpless. "Oh, we will be out to talk to you in just a second. Sorry, but I have to go." He slipped back into the room, and the unearthly silence came back. So I walked back to the lobby and sat down. A chaplain came by a bit later, as I was sitting motionless. My dad had a heart attack while under. He went into a coma, but they got his heart beating again. As I went in to see him, nurses and doctors filtered out of the room. Blood spatters on the sheets and floor. My dad quiet, wired into a half-dozen machines. About minutes later, when my mom arrived to answer my urgent texts and calls, the lobby had a couple of families in there chatting happily, and the staff was back to its business. We pulled his life support 4 days later, after learning he was irrevocably brain dead. The world can change so fast. Your life can get turned upside down. Your life can end. And for the people around you, it can just be another day. They go on without even noticing the pain inside you. That was the moment in my life this truth was most starkly plain. Nothing has ever been more terrifying. Story 9. When I was living in Geneva, One day, I got a craving for something from home. So naturally, I went to McDonald's and got some fries, Palm's frites. I am sitting outside with my frites when I notice some chaos and cacophony coming across the bridge. It looks like it is a World Trade Organization protest, complete with tractors and black bloc protesters throwing bricks and firebombs. This is odd. Geneva is usually quiet, tidy, and calm. I get up and start walking away from the McDonald's to try to get to a different part of the city, not realizing how wild this was about to get. As I get closer, things start getting real. They smash out storefronts, light cars on fire, and the Swiss police form a police line behind me. I am now stuck between black bloc protesters and irritated police. I get up and start moving quickly down the street as both parties are closing in on me and start inhaling a mix of burning car and some sort of gas. Not sure if it was tear gas or some sort of improvised smoke bomb from the protesters. People are yelling and it is loud as hell. I round a corner and run right into about Swiss police, who are preparing to set up a cordon to corral the protesters into a more controllable part of the city and start asking them to please let me through. They tense up and stare at me. Then one of them grabs me by the shoulder and sort of flings me behind them. And then they move on. I am in the clear, and it is immediately quiet with clean air and a free path back to a streetcar. Story. Not sure if this entirely counts, but last year I was walking home from work at night through one of the not-so-great areas of Long Island. But it was plenty well lit and very populated when this drunk guy comes up to me and hugs me. And of course I am like, dude, what the heck? But I hug him back because I have moderate to severe social anxiety. And he asked me if he can borrow my phone to make a phone call. I immediately figure he is trying to steal my phone. So I try to tell him no. But he gets in my face and tells me he has killed a guy and he has been to prison before and does not care if he has to beat me up. And he keeps doing the whole, I am your friend. Do not be scared. You can trust me thing. And he leads me up and down the street past 2 police cars that I try to signal to. Well, of course the officers ignore me. This goes on for about an hour and I get to meet all of his substance dealer friends and he ends up taking my phone in this time and strong-arming my password out of me. He then tells me he will give me back my phone if I buy him a pack of cigarettes, which is a problem because for one thing, I have literally $1 on me and I'm only at the time. We go to the gas station and I try to get the owner and 3 other customers to try to realize that I need help subtly without alerting the guy who was with me, and they all ignored me. At one point, the guy pulled a knife when I told him I could not buy them for him. Eventually, he forced me into the street. I almost got hit by 2 cars running across the street, and I ended up getting lucky and running into some guys from school who recognized me and helped me out, got a hold of my mother, and the police who conveniently did not see me, and even then, they managed to track down this guy who stole my phone within like minutes. And they did not believe me that I tried to get their attention. They thought I was trying to buy substances and the deal went south, which apparently was this guy's. A known convict and overall problematic person by the police in the area, modus operandi to steal the phones. That is, we both tell the police our story. I tell the same exact story to all 4 officers. They patronized me and my mother the whole time. And when they asked if I wanted to press charges, I said no, because I did not want to potentially have one of this guy's friends show up at my job and stab me while I am working. The police took this as a sign that I was trying to buy substances, and took the known dealer story and put that in the police report, not mine. Meanwhile, the whole time I'm shaking because I thought I was going to end up in the hospital or worse, and I'm terrified for the next few weeks that someone's going to find me and beat me up. Meanwhile, these officers are taking the side of a known convict over some kid who has no criminal record or has ever broken a law in his life. The whole situation is the main reason why I do not trust police or run to them for help, because the one time I did look to them for help, they patronized me and did not believe me and threw me under the bus. Story, a few things come to mind, but this is the biggest one for me. A few years ago, I was at the local mall outside waiting for my mom to get there. I see her car pull up and she turns around and goes to park. Parking is accomplished without incident. She's maybe feet away from me. She gets out of the car and some car drives up into that row of parking about seconds after she finishes parking. This guy maybe gets out of his car and starts yelling at my mom for stealing his parking, even though he was not anywhere near her when she was parking, calling her some nasty things, and says that if this were his country, that she would be dead for crossing a man. Anyways, my mom had parked fair and square. After he starts throwing this stuff at her, his relative gets out and also starts yelling at her. I'm a large person, 6'1" and I have a lot of muscle, but some extra chub too, because I am too lazy to diet perfectly and my wife likes it. That will be my excuse. But I hate fighting and violence. Regardless, I run towards them and my mind goes into warrior mode. This guy was getting uncomfortably close to my mom, so I bark some strong stuff at him and act like a caveman in heat fighting a saber tooth, and the guy actually screamed like a child and fell backwards over his car and begged me not to cut him. I do not even have a knife or anything on me. I tell him that respecting women is both important and honorable and ask him to apologize. And then he drove off. Adrenaline was going crazy and my heart was pounding, but my mom is safe and hopefully he learned his lesson. Story: I had a friend with primary progressive multiple sclerosis. He got sick early too, only as it progressed to the point that he started relying on a cane and some days a walker to get around. You can imagine how he changed. I say this not as an excuse for what he did, but so you can understand how anger and depression can make a person behave differently than they had before. By this time, he was not the same man I befriended. I still cared for him and wished him well, but we stopped hanging out after that because his attitude was too terrible. One evening, we were sitting around in a bowling alley bar. My friend's girlfriend is setting up a karaoke show, and the sun has not even gone down yet. It is at night. 3 guys come in and hassle her about wanting to sing now. She tells them it will not start for an hour. They hassle her some more, then wander off. They bowl. The place starts to gain some customers. The lights in the bar get turned on to balance out cosmic bowling. Then these 3 guys wander back in at about they want to sing. They get mad when she did not remember the songs they had shouted at her earlier while interfering with her microphones. They get mad again when they're told they have to fill out the little slips and wait their turn like everybody else. They get mad a 3rd time when she will not take dollar to let them go next. By now, our entire group of friends were there and celebrating a birthday. We're not cool. The guys wander away again, then almost get skipped over before showing up to do their turn half an hour later. As they pick up the microphones, they shout, "We better get 2 songs for making us wait too into them," causing feedback and a lot of angry people. She tells them 1 song, everybody gets a chance to sing. It devolves into a full-blown argument between them. My friend, who is having a walker day, gets up to go defend his girlfriend. And in the middle of the shouting, the whole room distinctly hears my friend say, "And if a bunch of black people think they can intimidate my girlfriend." He trails off as he realizes that the entire bar, and indeed a big chunk of the bowling alley, have gone silent. These guys are not about to and should not take that, but it did not have to go down the way it did. All of a sudden, he's trying to back away with his walker from these 3 guys who are all twice his size while he apologizes. They are shouting at him about how he is a crippled cracker and they're going to make sure he needs a wheelchair if he lives through this. And his girlfriend can use the walker after they hurt her legs too. Too far, they did not have to accept the apology. And if one of them had just punched him, I would have said that is fair and he deserved it. But we could not let them do what they were threatening. Next thing I know, 2 of our friends and I've stood up and I have shouted, "That is enough." Next thing I know, they're in our faces. One of my friends is just trying to negotiate our way out of it. The other is making threats. I am just standing there trying not to lose my game face because I'm terrified of this +pound, 6'6" mountain of a person who has picked me to square up with. I manage to duck under the punch he throws at me and somehow end up behind him. Desperately, I somehow end up with this guy in a full Nelson, except I am pounds of 5'8". At this point, I am this guy's new cape. He starts swinging around wildly shouting, "Get him off, get him off." The entire room has gone from fear and aggression to amusement. I hear people start to laugh. One of his buddies grabs me by the back of the shirt and shoves me away. I stumble, trip over something, and break my nose on the corner of a table. I cannot even claim a decently taken punch to the face. The mountain walks over to me. I'm now laying on the ground with blood gushing out of my face. He leans right down over me and shouts, "Stay down." Then he looks at me for a second, points a finger in my face, and says, "I get it. You have to stand up for your boy. What you really have to do is pick better boys or educate yours." Then the wave finger turns into an extended hand, and he helps me to my feet. Bartender grabs me a rag, and we all get kicked out together. When the police showed up and found us all except the loud mouth sitting outside congenially, they agreed to let us all go on our way and drive me to the hospital if we all agreed to drop the matter. My friend wanted charges pressed against all three and was threatening to sue the bar too. He backed down when I told him I would break his nose to match mine if he did anything of the sort. It was the scariest moment of my entire life. And the only reason I lived was because the mountain showed me mercy. This person wanted to bankrupt me and lawyers' fees after that. That was years ago. I only saw my friend twice after that. Once at a bar and once at his funeral. I miss the man he was before the multiple sclerosis. I do not miss the angry, depressed man he became. Story in second grade. I was playing at recess in a sandbox with a kid who lived around the corner from my house when this other kid walked up with what I can only describe as a gang of first graders. There were probably about 10 of them. They split us up and 3 or 4 went with my friend to the far corner of the sandbox, while the rest dragged me out under a tree more in the center of the playground. Now it is worth noting that I have a connective tissue disorder called Marfan syndrome. The short version is that I have a defect in my DNA for coding something that holds my connective tissue together, and as a result, I have always been very tall. I am 6'7" now and extremely skinny, but also very incapable of physical activity. It also means that taking a good hit from, say, contact sports could cause my aorta to rupture, and I would quite possibly die of internal bleeding before an ambulance showed up. So they started trying to pin me to the ground and drag me out while I was flailing and screaming. And the next thing I know, one kid is assigned to each of my legs, and the others are taking turns literally jumping on my groin and punching my face, punching my chest. And I'm shouting for help because I know all that stuff about Marfans. And what must have been the whole recess period full of kids is just circled around me, watching. The bell rings to end recess, and everyone scatters, and a few minutes later, some teacher runs out and helps me my feet. Turns out those kids also knew I had a heart problem. When I got called up to the principal the next day, he asked what happened, and that leader kid who happened to live just next door to my friend said that his dad had said we kids like me deserved to die, and besides, I was annoying. The principal threw his nameplate at the kid hard enough that it actually stuck into the wall where it hit. I did all my personality that day. Used to say hi to everyone, probably said no more than words to anyone other than a teacher or my closest friends until high school, and certainly was afraid to go outside for a while with that kid in my neighborhood. Story, I was practicing my whip cracking skills in a park. I had just become interested in learning to crack it, so I was still very enthusiastic about it. I was keeping to myself and being very mindful about where people were at all times when they were passing me, so as to be as safe as possible. Well, evidently, someone at the park did not appreciate the noise. I noticed that police cars had pulled up to the park. I sat down in front of a tree and had my whip next to me, reading a book on whip cracking. I got up and made a couple of small cracks and looked back to the book for more instruction. When I looked up from the book, the police were running toward me with shotguns pointed at me. They were shouting, "Drop the whip. This is in the middle of the day." So I did. And they made me get down on my hands and knees and put my hands behind my head the whole 9 yards. When they asked what I was doing, I told them I was just practicing my whip cracking. Once they determined I was not a threat, they let me stand up. Then the officer told me that sometimes people call and exaggerate a situation in order to get a faster officer response. Apparently, they had claimed that I was threatening people with my whip, which I was not. He told me I was lucky that he did not take my whip. Then he wrote me a ticket for, I kid you not, use of par contrary to design purpose. I had to go to court and everything. So I went, and the bailiff gives this huge speech about dollar being the cheapest fine anyone could possibly hope to get. And if you were offered that fine, you should just take it and count your blessings. Naturally, I'm offered the coveted dollar fine. I refuse. My public defender tells me if I take this to trial, I could end up having to pay something along the lines of dollar in fines, etc. I told her I did not care. It would be worth it to me to see the look on the jurors' faces to know that that is why they had been summoned. It gets set for a hearing, and I come back in a couple of weeks, talk to the public defender about it. We laugh for a little bit, and it was a different public defender, and go into the courtroom. All charges are dismissed. What sucks is after that, I became somewhat known by my local police department for it. I would call the non-emergency line and ask where a safe place I could go to do it was because I wanted to practice. I would be insulted about it over the phone, with the underlying message being that I should just stop doing it because there was something wrong with me for wanting to crack a whip in the park in the daytime. Story: I was walking home around 2 in the afternoon in the downtown part of my city. A guy came up behind me on an overpass and asked me for the time. I told him and kept walking, but he kept walking with me. I got a bad vibe from him, but could not really leave at that point. He even said, "Look, I'm not trying to talk to you. You are beautiful, but that is not it." So once I am able to, I turn and leave. I walked an unusual route to see if he was following me. I thought he was not, and opened the door to my building, and as the door was closing, he caught it. I was naive and afraid, and thought maybe he was going there anyway, too. I had just moved out and was years old. There are 2 sets of stairs, and he goes up different ones than me. As I'm unlocking my door, I hear the door down the hall, which are the stairs I took. So he had turned around and gone back up those. I hurried into my apartment and locked all 3 of my locks and sat on my bed. I heard the doorknob try to open, and then for minutes there was knocking for a minute, followed by silence for a minute. Again, I wasn't scared and had cannabis in my place, so I foolishly did not call the police. 3 hours later, I had not buzzed anyone in and was not expecting a visitor when the same knocking started, but this time ended within 5 minutes. Next day, my landlord was inspecting the roof and asked what happened the day before, and I told him I was followed home. Apparently, a neighbor had seen someone climb up the fire escape and onto the roof, and they came and confronted him, and he said he was my boyfriend trying to talk to me. Luckily, they threatened to call the police, and he left. One of the scariest parts of it was I could not remember what he looked like at all. So for the next few weeks, I felt pretty uneasy around my neighborhood. Story not really well lit since it happened at night, but the parking lot was, and there were a bunch of people around. I had just gotten off my shift at Cracker Barrel, and I went to the CVS pharmacy to grab some sleep medicine as I had major insomnia problems. Had dollar from tips from that night and the night before in the center console of my car. As I parked and was about to get out, a man who was about years old walked up to my car and started talking to me. It started out innocently enough with him asking me about my Mustang, whether it was a stick shift or not, engine type, etc. I talked to him for a bit about it, and then he asked to bum a cigarette. When I opened my door again to grab my pack, he held onto the top of the door, and I did not really think much of it first. But as soon as I threw the pack back into the car and went to close the door, he pushed past me and sat in the driver's seat. Now I had the keys, so I was not worried that he was going to steal my car, just extremely weirded out and getting more and more nervous by the second, which unfortunately showed pretty obviously. He was still acting like he was interested in my car, with him acting like he was checking out the clutch and transmission, but then in full view of me, he opened the center console, casually grabbed my dollar, slipped it in his pocket, then got out of the car like nothing happened. I was stunned and was thinking there is no way that just happened. So I kind of laughed and asked what he was playing at. He looked at me with the creepiest fake smile I have ever seen and started saying something about, "Do not worry about the money. I'm going to give it back if you follow me into this neighborhood and meet my friend with me." All the while, he is looking at a completely dark street about feet away from the CVS parking lot and gesturing for me to follow him. I was seriously starting to freak out, but now I was angry too, since he was messing around with the money I had worked hard to get. He turned around and started walking away, and I completely dropped the nice guy act and started asking him what he was doing with my money. He just completely ignored me and started to walk faster. For some reason, this was the first time it occurred to me that I was being robbed, since it had never happened before. And I instantly decided that he was not getting away with my money because he would be gone in a second if I let him wander off. I followed him and started to yell at him to give me back his money. He walked faster. Then the part that still upsets me to this day occurred. A man leaving the CVS was forced to stop since we were both standing in the middle of the parking lot, and he rolled down his window and asked me what was going on. I looked him in the eyes and said, "This man robbed me of dollar and is trying to get away. Can you please help me?" I was just years old, scared, and did not know what to do. And he looked like a big guy who could have easily helped me. And what does he do? He just blankly stares at me. And when I repeated myself, He held his hands up to his ears and started gesturing like he was deaf or could not hear. Then he drove off. My blood boiled. He had just asked me what the problem was, then acted like he was deaf to avoid getting involved, and just left me on my own with this guy. I did not really blame him since it was a strange situation, but still it was my first experience with how people will refuse to help you in a public situation. There was another story I read on here about a person getting hurt in full view of a crowd of people who all ignored him. But it really is shocking how much people will refuse to help you when you really need it in public. So I keep chasing this guy, and now we are out of the parking lot. It is pitch black, and I know if this guy is going to try something, it is going to be now. So I made the decision to try something risky. I stopped shouting at him, walked up real close behind him, and quickly grabbed his right arm while reaching into his pocket with my left. Well, he elbows me in the stomach and swings a box cutter at me with his other hand. All right, time to stop following him so closely. I kept following him, though, just at a distance. After about 2 minutes of this, we reached the neighborhood I mentioned earlier, and at this point he turned around and sort of mock charged me. I could tell that he was not going to actually stab me, but I ran anyway because I was not about to risk getting cut by a box cutter. I have seen Breaking Bad. So anyway, I run back to my car and jumped in and drove to the neighborhood I lost him in while calling the police. As I turned into the neighborhood, I saw him standing on the front stoop of this apartment building looking around like he was waiting to meet someone, probably his dealer or whoever he owed money to. When he saw me pull up, he quickly ran inside and threw the box cutter into the bush next to him. But I had already seen what building he lived in and was able to tell the dispatcher what apartment number he was in. The police got there less than a minute later. Hats off to them. I pointed out the building that he went into, and he nodded, and we both watched the windows while waiting for backup to arrive. While the second police car was pulling in, the officer and I both saw people opening the shades on the window of the top floor, looking down and quickly closing them. So now we had a room that he probably was in. The 3 officers told me to wait as they had enough now to enter and knock on the door. They found this guy hiding under the staircase on the first floor. And as soon as they shined their lights on him, they told me he instantly came out with his hands up and said, "It is me." I pointed out to the police where the box cutter was and described it to them before they recovered it to prove it was the same one he pulled on me. I then told them exactly how much he stole from me, and they found the exact amount on him. Pretty much an open and shut case. I got called in to testify around 6 months ago, but he asked for a jury trial. And I have not heard anything about the case since. These days I kind of feel bad for him and would honestly not even press charges now if I got called back into court. He was crying at the end and gave up instantly, and it was clear he was probably dealing with addiction or owed someone money. Still, robbing someone and pulling a knife on them is not really the way to get it. The scariest part of this, though, was not at all the robbery or the box cutter. The scariest part by far was how people will just completely ignore you and pretend nothing is happening during your greatest time of need. Story quite a while ago, about years ago, I was in the Navy station in San Diego. I grew up in the Los Angeles area, so on weekends I would just hop the Greyhound north to hang with my friends. I was young and pretty free with my money, so I dressed well and wore a Rolex Mariner. Anyway, I am in the San Diego Greyhound station one Friday afternoon, waiting for my bus and needed to use the restroom, so I grabbed my bag and head into the bathroom. Peripherally, I noticed some man start to follow me in, so I at least had some time to think about the scenario. I step up to the center urinal and put my bag down just as he walks in and looks around. We're the only ones in the room. He walks directly up to me and pulls a knife. "Give me your watch or I will hurt you." I tell him to get lost and turn to face him. I had been in similar situations before and learned that about half the time you confront these people, they will back down. This was not one of those times. I will interject here that I had had some formal hand-to-hand training and a lot of time on the streets. I guess this guy figured that since I was dressed well, that I would be an easy mark. He takes a slashing swing at me with a knife about chest level that I successfully back away from. But then he comes at me. Lunging blade first toward my face. Instinct kicked in. I dodged the blade with my head and grabbed his wrist, and in one sweeping motion, twisted his arm down and rigid and brought my other forearm firmly down behind his elbow, brutally hyper, extending the joint. He screams, and the knife drops. Apparently, I was not done. Still holding firmly onto his wrist, I swing my body around, dragging his momentum with me, and slam him crown first into the leading edge of one of the urinal sides. The urinal did not give, but his skull did. He slumped to the ground in a lifeless lump of flesh. All in all, this was about to seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Realizing that I may have just killed a man, I started shaking. So I grabbed my bag, sat down against the opposite wall, and just stared at him. I did not see any sign of breathing. So I started to picture the worst: arrest, prison, etc. I'm not sure how long it took, but eventually someone came in, surveyed the scene, and called for security. Eventually an ambulance and police were called. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and I was taken to the station and booked. I gave my statement. They called the base police, who came and picked me up. I was held in a brig through the weekend and into Monday. Apparently the man had a record of previous assaults and armed robbery and was a known dangerous individual. So after being held the entire weekend until they could consult with the district attorney, the police department dropped the charges and considered it self-defense. The Navy was not so lenient, and I ended up getting busted down a rank and put on restriction. Cannot leave the ship for days. I still cannot walk into a public restroom without checking my back. Story more weird and confusing than terrifying, but when I was at a convention recently, I was in costume as a character from a lesser-known anime series. As I was walking back to the main convention area, a young man politely asked for a photo, and of course I said yes, because it is generally expected to be asked for photos at a convention. I posed, he took the picture, and then beckoned me over. I thought he was going to show me what the picture looked like, as many photographers do, but instead he grabbed me into a very tight hug that went way beyond the boundaries of normal convention behavior, and he kept me in a headlock while he repeatedly chanted the character's name in this creepy voice. Having a background in martial arts, I got out of the headlock very quickly and pushed him away firmly, and I assume he knew he was in the wrong because he stuttered a bit, and then he ran away very fast. He was not in any sort of fancy outfit, so he slipped away into the crowd before I could get any identifying information. When I relayed this to my friends, they were really concerned, but I was just baffled rather than distressed. It is probably the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me at a convention. It happened in an area where there were lots of people, but the situation seemed to go unnoticed. Story, it was at the beach in New Jersey. I was years old, and I was with my older sister. She was at the time. Her toddler son was with us. He was 4 at the time. It was a gorgeous day, and the beach was crowded. We found a spot about 3 feet from the shoreline and set up our beach chairs, the kind that fold out so that you can lie on them. My sister is a huge flirt, so quickly, some guy asked her to swim with him. She left me to watch her son, who was playing in the sand right at the shoreline, close by. I was in the chair, keeping an eye on him while my sister went off with this guy. I recall the waves being huge and tons of people everywhere. In a bit, a ball came my way, so I turned to pick it up and toss it to the owners. And when I turned around, my nephew was gone. It was literally 1 second. The sheer panic I felt looking to see if a wave took him, then visually scanning the beach for him. I was trembling, with thousands of scenarios racing through my year-old mind. I turned back to scan the beach again, and there under one of our chairs was my nephew with a juice box. He was hiding because he seized the opportunity to grab one and hid under the chair when I was returning the ball. I was so relieved and of course just sat beside him. My sister came back. All was fine, but those moments when I could not see him, I nearly died. Story, I used to have a best friend. All through high school. Every day hanging out, doing teenage things. He got heavily into substances and in trouble with the people affiliated with substances. I think it all really turned sour when he turned to crack. I smoked pot, but that was as far as I wanted to take it. We still hung out. I was still there for him, not to feed his addiction or support him, but to be his friend. He had never messed me over, so we still got along fine. Then he left for a few months and came back. When he came back, he did not get a hold of me. I ran into him one day, and we started hanging out again. I could tell he was different, fearful. I did not ask what was up. Maybe I should have, but I did not. We go for a drive, stop at a convenience store, and someone pulls up to his window and grabs him by the collar and starts yelling at him and hitting him. I knew who this person was. He was a big-time substance dealer in the area. He easily had access to a gun, but probably did not think he would need to bring it to a convenience store. My friend took a few punches, and then the guy let off, saying he would be back for his money, and gave me a stern warning. He knew me, and he knew I was just a friend of his about not being seen with him, or I would risk getting seriously hurt by affiliation. A few weeks later, I get a phone call from my friend. He is panicking and telling me this long story that I knew was a lie. He was taken hostage by two people in his home, and they demanded money, which he did not have. So he took it from his mom's purse and gave it to them. I quickly pieced together that he took the money from his mom's purse either to settle a debt or to buy substances. I did not know, but he needed $1. I told him I would cover him if he promised to pay me back. I would not run after him for it. He would have to come to me with the money and pay me back, or else he lost a 6-year best friendship for $1 worth of substances. My thing was that he had never used me to feed his addiction. This was it. I knew this was it. I was hoping he would admit to being messed up and needing the money for substances, but he never did. He just stuck to his story. Anyway, I go to him. We talk a bit. I pretend to believe his story, so I do not lose even more respect for him. We walk to the bank so I can make a withdrawal and give him $1, and as we were in the bank, someone on the street spots him, someone who calls a group of people. And there I am, held inside the bank by a bunch of people. If we leave, they would hurt him because he messed them over and hurt me for my money. So I look at him, I give him the money and say, "Pay me back whenever I do not care what you do with it," and walk out. They were going to start something with me, and no matter how much confidence you put out, they would not back down. I talked to them and name-dropped a few people who would have my back if anything happened to me, and they backed off. I headed back to his house and chatted with his mom for a while. I told her I gave him the money to pay her back. She said she would never see that money. I told her I knew she had warned me not to get involved, that I would only get hurt. I told her I knew, but I just wanted as much time as possible with my friend before he forgot how much he meant to me. He never found me to pay me back. He never contacted me because he knew he had messed me over and I would be mad. I lost my friend over $1 in broad daylight. Years later, we ran into each other at a bar. He bought me drinks and apologized for messing me over, as though he had never hurt me. He was a different person. We did not bond the same anymore. I had grown. He had changed. Story was home alone on a Saturday morning. I must have been, and I heard banging on my front door like a delivery worker banging hard kind of banging. I knew my dad was at work and figured if it was him and he needed me, he would call. Honestly, I just wanted to sleep in. The banging continued for a good 5 to 10 minutes periodically before I got annoyed and went to the door. The one thing I cherished was sleeping in on weekends, and some person was going to ruin it for me to talk about something or sell me something. I opened the door and no one was there. I was spooked at first, but I made them wait, so I figured they left. I started to walk back to my room when suddenly I heard the sliding glass door directly adjacent to the front door where I was standing. Slide opened so fast the glass shattered. Loud as anything. The next part happened in about 3 seconds. I froze, and like every kid who watches too many movies, thought I had some way to defend my apartment from intruder. I always figured I would go all tough on someone trying to break in, but when reality actually sets in, it is terrifying. I went from, "I'm going to beat this guy," to "what if some person is breaking in and has a weapon?" Suddenly my plans, along with my bravery, flew out the window, and I ran down the hall to my room. I quietly closed the door and heard the blinds shake as someone passed through them, just as the door latched shut. I stared at my door, heart pounding, wondering what to do. I grabbed a golf club in my room, my sister's little pink putter from when she was, and jumped in the closet. I left it cracked and I was breathing so fast. I thought maybe he would just leave since we had a nice TV in the living room. He could grab it and go. Nope. Next thing I heard was my bedroom door swinging open. I just about panicked as this guy came into view. He was about 5'7", tattooed up to his neck and bald. I was about 5 foot at the time, but weighed like pounds. So I was a string bean. I saw him stop and look around my room like he was taking it all in. I figured his next stop was the closet. So I either took him by surprise or he was going to find me. I took a deep breath and thought, time to man up. And I burst open the closet door, raised the golf club, and in a really shaky voice said, "What are you doing in here?" The guy immediately stepped back, put his hands up, and said he was looking for someone named Carlos. I still had the golf club raised, but the guy did not look scared, just confused and uncomfortable. As I backed him into the living room, his phone started ringing. He pulled it out, and the caller ID said, Carlos. He answered on speaker, and Carlos asked where he was. The guy said, I am at an apartment, and there is some kid here in his underwear with a golf club. Is this a joke? I looked down at myself and realized I was wearing only a tiny pair of boxers and holding a pink golf club designed for a year-old girl. Anyway, his friend said he was supposed to go to, or something close to, and he misunderstood. He said it was an honest mistake and left. It all checked out with the phone call and story, and I just wanted him out of there. But I still do not know why he broke the sliding door to get in. Story, I was driving through my neighborhood in a mile-per-hour zone. There was a car in front of me going 5 miles per hour, and there was far more than enough room for another vehicle. Thinking he was going to turn, I waited. After a minute of him continuing to drive super slow, I decided I would pass him. I tried to pass him on the left, and he ran me off the road intentionally. I pulled back on the road and slowed down to see if he would stop to see what was going on. But no, he sped up. I decided at that point I would call the police and my insurance when I got home. I did not want a confrontation, so I took note of his license plate and thought I would go slow enough for him to leave. He then braked to a full stop, then sped up and kept doing it, attempting to get me to crash into him so I would be at fault in his mind. At this point, I pulled over and stopped completely, smoking a whole cigarette, letting about 4 or 5 minutes go by. Continuing driving, I got up to the stop sign after that, and he was gone. I mentally cheered. I kept driving and got to the next stop sign, and he was there, waiting. Enough red flags had gone on at this point. So I stopped on the side of the street around feet away, and he was still sitting at the stop sign, I guess waiting for me to catch up. I drew my firearm from my inside the waistband thumb brake holster fast enough that I had forgotten the brake and tore my slacks in the process. I put it under my hat in the passenger seat and waited for him to keep driving. He did. I got up to the next stop sign, and he was waiting for me again. But this time he had blocked off the entire street with his SUV, had hopped out with a gun behind his back, and was screaming, "Come on, let's go," over and over again. As he got up to my vehicle, he started to swing the gun around to point it at me and threaten me through my window, which I was not about to roll down. Before he got the motion more than started, he noticed that I had had my firearm pointed at the door the entire time. If he had opened fire at a distance, I was going to shoot through the windshield of my vehicle. And if he pointed the gun at me when he neared my vehicle, I was going to shoot through the door. He saw my gun turn pale, backed off, and disappeared. This is where it got scarier and strange. I stayed there and started calling the cops. I had no air conditioning in that car. It was hot, so I rolled down the driver's side window about 4 inches. Before I could get my phone's dialer up to dial, he showed back up with his girlfriend. She hopped out with a stun gun and tried to shove it through my window, screaming the same thing he did, "Come on, let's go," over and over again. At this point, around minutes had gone by. I calmly told them that I was armed and tired of being threatened and that I was going to defend myself, that I did not have time to deal with their behavior, and that threatening me was not going to get them anywhere good. Her response was that they were going to call the cops and tell them that I had held them at gunpoint for an hour. This is why I have a dash cam behind my head in my cars now. She realized that I was not going to be as restrained anymore, and that they really were about to get themselves hurt for threatening me and attempting to assault me. They left. Somehow I knew it was not over. I called the police. An officer came out and took my report and told me about their call. I asked him to go talk to them about threatening people and told him I did what I could to de-escalate the situation about the guy's aggressive driving, the firearm he had drawn, the stun gun she threatened me with, and their statement about lying to the police. My intuition, given how strange they behaved, was that they must be on something and not in their right mind. I took out a rifle and shotgun, set them ready, and placed them by the entrances to my house. And, as I do when I'm concerned about something, turn on a computer monitor to watch the cameras I have around the outside of my house. Around midnight, I started doubting myself, telling myself that I was overreacting. No one was coming to my house, and turned off the monitor for the cameras and headed to bed. They were still recording. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the neighbor's dog barking, which set me off a bit. But it was about to storm that night, so I figured it was the weather and went back to bed. About minutes later, I heard some noise coming from the front, but the wind had been whipping up for the last hour, so I figured it was just that. Then I heard the door rattle which happens when it is windy, told myself I was paranoid and headed back to bed. This was on a Friday after work. The last thing I wanted to do was waste time on this. My mom stopped by on Monday morning wanting to borrow my car as hers was acting odd. I told her I had just detailed the car on Thursday. The gas tank was full and to enjoy it. She came back and telling me I was a liar about detailing it, that I was a slob, and asked what I did to the doors and inside the car. I looked and sure enough, my seats were slashed. The doors had been cut into and everything valuable had been stolen. I turned on the footage and sure enough, the guy was back, wearing a hoodie and gloves, so there was no evidence. Spent about minutes in my car with a flashlight and tried to force open the front door for about 2 minutes before leaving. I'm never turning that monitor off again and have it set up to alert my phone now. I will also never ignore my intuition again. Second, I run a retail business in a high-traffic area in a large city. Not the most terrible thing, but an example of something common enough to cause me to always carry a firearm. I had a heavy-set man come in and push over a year-old woman intentionally. She ended up on the floor, obviously in pain. He walked by her and went into the back of the store mumbling. I stood up, helped her up, and asked him if there was something I could help with. He started yelling the same insult over and over again. About people fled the store immediately. The woman did nod and moved to a corner, I think out of concern for me. I asked him to leave, and he kept yelling at me. He went out the door, turned the corner, and disappeared. And I thought it was over. He came back, opened the door, and told me that if I was not coming out, he was coming in after me. At this point, I was trying to keep calm, but this pushed me too far. I grabbed my phone with one hand and drew my firearm with the other and called the police. He fled and was not caught. This is one of 3 assault or attempted assault incidents I have had in my business in the last 2 years. If I had not been armed, he probably would have tried to hurt me. I could have responded to either of these situations worse. But the last thing I want to do is talk to the police, a judge and attorneys about a situation like this. Defending against civil suits, even if you do not get criminal charges, can ruin your life. However, the next time someone attempts to break into my house in the middle of the night, they're going to be met with rounds through the door. I'm not about to let someone assault me or attempt to get into my house. People are unpredictable,